In the cold, sterile corridors of the alien citadel, Niara walked with a heaviness in each step, as if approaching her own doom. Her heart pounded against her chest, a drum of war in the silence of her solitary march. Today marked the ritual, a grand ceremony binding human males with her species, the Zeri, to preserve their lineage. Yet her soul recoiled at the thought. The prospect of union with a human, a species known for their barbaric wars and primal instincts, filled her with dread. Niara's iridescent hair cascaded down her back in a shimmer of blues and silvers, framing her angular face with an otherworldly grace. Her violet eyes, usually calm and commanding, now betrayed her turmoil. Adorned in the ceremonial silk robe, she felt not sanctified but imprisoned, shackled to a destiny she never desired. As she approached the chamber of binding, the doors slid open with a mechanical sigh, revealing the solemn space within. A pair of emotionless guards nodded her through, their faces obscured behind ceremonial helmets. The chamber, filled with the scent of ancient incense and the low hum of archaic machinery, held the binding altar at its center, surrounded by pulsating crystals that seemed to breathe in anticipation. The high priestess, cloaked in white, stood silent, her presence as imposing as the fate awaiting Niara. On the opposite end stood the humans, and her gaze involuntarily met the soldier's, Jason. He was not the brute she had imagined. His military uniform spoke of numerous battles, yet it was his eyes, a piercing shade of green, that halted her thoughts. They held a vulnerability that puzzled Niara, stirring a feeling in her she couldn't quite name. As the high priestess's voice filled the chamber, announcing the commencement of the ritual, Niara's reluctant whisper, "I accept," sealed her fate alongside Jason's. With each step forward her heart raced, not with anticipation, but with a silent plea for something, anything, to halt the proceedings. But as she stood before the altar, her resolve hardened. This alliance was not for love or desire, but survival, hers, his, and their entire species. As the ritual chant echoed, a web of ancient energies wrapped around her, binding her to the human whose fate was now irreversibly tied to hers. The ritual chant intensified, resonating through the chamber as Niara and Jason stood opposite each other on the ancient binding altar. The crystals surrounding them glowed brighter, their light pulsating like the heartbeat of the citadel itself. Niara's senses heightened. Each breath Jason took seemed to synchronize with her own, enveloping her in a shared rhythm that was both unnerving and strangely intimate. Jason's gaze, intense and probing, never left hers. Niara could see the soldier beneath the stoic exterior, weathered by wars, yet standing before her not as a conqueror, but as a fellow captive to destiny. The air between them thickened with the weight of unspoken questions. Was he wondering, too, about the significance of their forced union beyond the survival of their races? As the high priestess's voice crescendoed, a solemnity settled over the room. "With this union, you are the bearers of hope and continuity," she declared, her words echoing off the stone walls. Niara felt a chill run through her as the reality of those words sank in. The responsibility was immense, a burden neither of them had asked for. The ceremony moved to its climax. Jason stepped forward, his movements deliberate, closing the distance between them. Niara's breath hitched as he reached out, his hand hesitating just moments away from her skin. It was a gesture so filled with human warmth, yet so alien to her own experiences. His touch, when it finally came, was lighter than she had anticipated, but electric, sending a shiver through her body that she couldn't control. Her own hand lifted, driven by a force she didn't fully understand, to meet his. Their fingers touched, and the simple contact sparked a connection that seemed to transcend physical boundaries. The crystals flared as if to acknowledge the significance of their touch, their light reflecting in Niara's violet eyes, turning them into pools of starlit night. "I don't understand any of this," Jason murmured, his voice low, meant only for her ears amid the ritualistic hum. His honesty, raw and unwieldy, struck a chord within Niara. He was as lost in this as she was, bound not just by duty, but by an ancient magic neither of them could fathom. "You're not alone in that," Niara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The script of the ritual had dictated their actions so far, but in this moment it was their mutual confusion and reluctant acceptance that truly bound them. "Whatever this is, whatever it means, we're in it together now." The high priestess lifted her arms, signaling the end of the ceremony. "The bond is sealed. May it bring forth the unity and strength your peoples need." Her words, solemn and final, left a resonance in the air, a declaration of a new beginning for Niara and Jason. As the ceremony concluded, the guards opened the chamber doors, and the scent of the citadel's night air wafted in. The outside world felt suddenly too vast, too real. Niara stepped off the altar, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her, the fabric whispering against the ancient stone floor. Jason followed, a silent shadow mirroring her steps. Together they walked out of the chamber, the weight of the high priestess's words and the uncertainty of their future pressing down on them. Niara knew the ritual was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, they would have to face it together, bound not just by the rite, but by a newfound connection that neither could deny nor escape. As Niara and Jason stepped into the cool night air of the citadel, the solemnity of the chamber gave way to a realm under the twin moons, casting an eerie glow over the alien landscape. The silence between them was filled only by the distant calls of nocturnal creatures, a stark contrast to the intense ritual they had just endured. Walking side by side, yet each lost in their thoughts, they navigated the winding paths of the citadel. The binding had physically ended, but its resonance lingered, binding their senses more tightly than either could have anticipated. Niara felt an unfamiliar pull towards Jason, an inexplicable tether that drew her to him beyond the dictates of the ritual. Jason broke the silence, his voice carrying a mix of curiosity and concern. "What happens now?" They didn't exactly provide a manual for this. His attempt at humor did little to mask the unease that underpinned his words. Niara glanced at him, seeing the soldier facade momentarily slip, revealing a man thrust into the unknown. "We begin by understanding what this bond means," Niara responded, her voice echoing a calm she did not feel. "Our people have legends, stories of bonds that brought great strength and, at times, great destruction. We must navigate this carefully." Their path led them to a viewpoint overlooking the citadel, a city of spires that rose like spears against the night sky. The architectural marvel of her people, now shadowed by the implications of their forced union, seemed more daunting under the gaze of the moons. Jason leaned against the parapet, his eyes scanning the horizon. "In my world, bonds are formed by choice, through battles fought together or years spent side by side. This," he gestured vaguely between them, "is something else entirely." Niara joined him at the railing, her eyes also on the horizon. In the Zeri culture, bonds are sacred. They are believed to amplify strengths, share burdens, and in rare cases, blend thoughts and emotions. We may experience fragments of each other's consciousness, feelings, or memories. The revelation seemed to weigh heavily on Jason, his brow furrowing. "So, we could literally feel what the other feels?" he asked, skepticism mingling with intrigue in his tone. "Possibly," Niara admitted, her gaze not leaving the vista before them. "It's not just a physical union, but a psychic one. The elders say it's a merging of souls, for better or worse." The concept of sharing such an intimate connection with a stranger was daunting. Jason looked at Niara, trying to reconcile the alien before him with the partner fate had thrust upon him. Despite the initial revulsion and fear, there was a growing curiosity about the person who now shared this inexplicable bond with him. Niara felt his gaze and met his eyes. "We will likely discover much we do not expect about each other," she said, her voice a whisper carried away by the wind. "The bond might draw us together, but it will also test us. We must be prepared to face not only what we find in each other, but what we find within ourselves. The night deepened around them, the twin moons casting long shadows over the citadel. The chill in the air mirrored the uncertainty that wrapped around their hearts. Yet, as they stood there, the initial barriers of species and preconceptions began to blur, softened by the shared experience of the unknown. "We'll need to rely on each other," Jason finally said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "If we are to navigate this, it will be as allies, not adversaries." Niara nodded, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Then let us begin by understanding our bond, exploring its depths and limits. We stand together, not just by the decree of a ritual, but by necessity." With a mutual agreement unspoken but strongly felt, they turned from the viewpoint, their steps synchronized as they headed back into the heart of the citadel. Each was acutely aware of the other's presence, a constant reminder of the bond that now linked them, invisible yet as tangible as the cool night air enveloping them as they walked. As Niara and Jason retreated from the viewpoint and back into the labyrinth of the citadel's alleys, the surreal quality of their circumstances began to settle in. The city, with its bioluminescent flora and intricate spiraling architecture, felt both alien and eerily quiet, mirroring the complexity of their newly formed bond. They moved through the dimly lit pathways, their footsteps a soft echo against the stone. Jason's mind wrestled with the reality of their psychic connection. "Do you think we'll really start to feel each other's emotions, or even thoughts?" he asked, his tone a mix of skepticism and genuine curiosity. The concept was hard for him to grasp, coming from a world where such phenomena were relegated to science fiction. Niara considered his question, her own understanding of the bond based on ancient teachings rather than experience. "It's said that the bond grows over time, strengthening as we learn to trust and understand each other," she explained. "We may begin to sense each other's moods, and in moments of great stress or joy, perhaps even hear fleeting thoughts." They paused beneath an archway, its stones glowing softly with phosphorescent moss. The cool air carried the scent of the night blooms, adding a layer of freshness to the heavy atmosphere of anticipation. "Sounds invasive," Jason muttered, running a hand through his hair. His discomfort was palpable, and for a moment Niara felt a twinge of something that wasn't her own, anxiety perhaps, filtering through from Jason's side of their bond. "It can be," Niara acknowledged, her voice gentle. "But it also creates a partnership deeper than any traditional alliance. It's a shared strength, forged in the very essence of our beings. We won't just be allies, we'll be parts of a whole." Jason looked at her, his green eyes reflecting a mix of moonlight and the moss's glow. "And if one of us falls, the other feels it too, I suppose," he concluded, a grim note in his voice. "Yes, and that is why the bond is both a gift and a curse," Niara responded. She turned to face him fully, her violet eyes earnest. "We must be vigilant, protect not only our physical selves but also our mental and emotional states. Our well-being is now intertwined." They resumed walking, the silence between them now filled with a mutual contemplation of their shared fate. As they navigated through a particularly narrow passageway, Jason's earlier humor had faded, replaced by a contemplative seriousness. "I need to understand everything about this bond," he stated firmly. "If I'm to be linked to someone else's soul, I want to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Niara nodded in agreement. "We will explore the archives tomorrow," she promised. "The texts of the ancients might hold more insights into what we can expect. Knowledge will be our safeguard." Their path eventually led them back to the central square of the citadel, now deserted and bathed in the soft light of the moons. The quiet around them felt like a blanket, soothing yet suffocating with its intensity. "We should try to rest," Niara suggested, though the idea of sleep seemed far-fetched with their minds so tumultuously intertwined. "Rest, right?" Jason scoffed lightly, but his tone lacked its earlier edge. "I'll try, but I make no promises. This is all still too much to take in." As they parted ways at the entrance to their respective quarters, a silent acknowledgement passed between them. Tonight marked the beginning of a profound journey, not just across the physical distance of their worlds, but through the uncharted territory of their bonded souls. Niara watched Jason disappear around a corner, feeling an echo of his apprehension. It was strange, feeling another person's emotions as if they were her own. She touched her chest, her heart beating a steady rhythm that now carried the weight of two souls, connected beyond choice, bound by an ancient right that neither fully understood but would come to define them both. As Niara retreated to her quarters, the strange sensation of carrying another's emotional weight lingered, a constant reminder of her bond with Jason. She settled into the quiet solitude of her room, the soft hum of the Citadel's energy walls a gentle backdrop to her swirling thoughts. Trying to find peace, Niara lay down, her mind replaying the events of the ceremony and the subsequent revelations. The bond, once an abstract concept taught by elders, was now a tangible presence in her life, intricately woven into her being. She closed her eyes, attempting to shut out the world and perhaps touch the edges of this new inner connection that she shared with Jason. As the night deepened, her thoughts drifted towards Jason's earlier expressions of apprehension. She could feel a faint echo of his restlessness, a shared undercurrent that seemed to pulse through their bond. It was an odd feeling, knowing someone else's emotional state so intimately, even when physically apart. Meanwhile, Jason found sleep elusive. He paced his room, each step a beat in the symphony of his unsettled mind. The foreignness of the Citadel, with its alien architecture and otherworldly silence, compounded his sense of isolation. Yet he was not truly alone. Niara's presence, though not visible, was a constant in his mind, a connection that both comforted and unnerved him. Driven by a restless energy, Jason eventually left his room, wandering the silent hallways bathed in the soft glow of the Citadel's energy lights. As he walked, he mulled over the implications of their bond, his mind grappling with the balance of maintaining his identity while being so deeply connected to another. Unbeknownst to him, Niara also rose from her bed, drawn by a subtle pull in her consciousness towards Jason. She followed this instinctual guide through the corridors, her steps quiet but determined. The bond acted almost as a compass, guiding her to where Jason roamed. They met unexpectedly at a crossway, both stopping short as they came face to face under the dim lights. The surprise in Jason's eyes mirrored Niara's own, but there was also a flicker of something else. Relief, perhaps, or simply the acknowledgement of their shared predicament. "Couldn't sleep?" Niara asked, her voice low and empathetic. Jason shook his head, a wry smile touching his lips. "Number. And I guess you couldn't either. It seems our bond has more immediate effects than we thought." Niara nodded, stepping closer. "It's strange, isn't it? Feeling someone else's restlessness as if it's your own." "More than strange," Jason agreed. "It's like being tied to a mirror that reflects not what you are, but what you feel." They decided to walk together, finding comfort in shared company amidst their uncertainty. As they strolled through the quiet Citadel, they talked more openly about their fears and hopes regarding the bond. "It's said that some bonds grow strong enough to allow shared thoughts, even visions," Niara shared, her voice tinged with awe and trepidation, "but it requires deep mutual understanding and trust." "Trust," Jason repeated, considering the weight of the word. "That's going to be our biggest challenge, isn't it? Learning to trust not just each other's actions, but our thoughts and feelings." Niara paused, turning to face him. "Yes, and I think it starts with moments like this, sharing our doubts, our fears. We're in this together, Jason, for better or worse." As they continued their nighttime wanderings, a silent agreement formed between them, an unspoken commitment to navigate this uncharted journey side by side. The bond might have been forged by ritual, but its true strength would come from their willingness to explore its depths together, discovering not only the power it held, but also the potential it offered for understanding and unity. As Niara and Jason continued their nocturnal wanderings through the empty corridors of the Citadel, the alien environment around them somehow began to feel less daunting. The shared experience of insomnia, prompted by their newly formed bond, turned into an impromptu exploration of not only the physical spaces around them, but also the emotional landscapes within. "This bond, it's like nothing I've ever encountered," Jason said, breaking the silence that had settled between them. His voice echoed slightly off the high arching walls of the Citadel. "Back on Earth, bonds are formed over time, through shared experiences and choices. This instant connection, it's disorienting." Niara listened intently, her violet eyes reflecting a thoughtful glow from the ambient light. "Here among the Zeri, we believe that such bonds are sacred. They are thought to be gifts from the ancients, guiding us to greater unity and strength. But they also demand great responsibility and insight." They paused by a large window overlooking the Citadel's central garden, a rare patch of greenery that thrived under the light of the twin moons. The garden was tranquil, its exotic plants casting long shadows on the ground, and seemed to offer a moment of peace. "As disorienting as it is, I can see the value in it," Jason admitted, watching a pair of luminescent insects dance above a flowering bush. "There's something pure about forming a connection based on emotional resonance rather than history or obligation." Niara smiled faintly. "Perhaps that purity is what the elders hope to preserve with these rituals. By binding us in such a way, they force us to confront our true selves, mirrored in another." Their conversation drifted towards the more practical aspects of their situation. "We'll need to figure out how to work together effectively," Jason said, his tone shifting towards resolve. "If our emotions and even thoughts are going to be this intertwined, we should set some ground rules. Boundaries, even if they're just mental for now." Niara agreed, nodding thoughtfully. "We should start by establishing times when we attempt to consciously connect and share, and times when we try to maintain individual space. Even if we can't fully block out each other's emotions, we can at least try to respect that boundary." As they set these initial ground rules, a sense of partnership began to form, grounding the abstract concept of their bond into something more manageable. They continued their walk, slowly circling back towards their respective quarters. Before they parted ways, Jason stopped and turned to Niara. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for navigating this with me. I know it wasn't your choice either, but I'm glad it's you on the other end of this bond." Niara's expression softened. "And I'm grateful for your openness and effort, Jason. We might be from different worlds, but in this, we are united." With a tentative sense of camaraderie developing, they finally bid each other good night, each retreating to their quarters with a mix of apprehension and a budding sense of anticipation for what their bond might bring. As Niara lay down to sleep, the earlier turmoil within her seemed to settle. The connection with Jason, once a source of great anxiety, began to feel like a beacon of potential. Across the Citadel, Jason experienced a similar revelation, the once overwhelming intrusion of Niara's emotions now threading into the fabric of his thoughts with less alarm and more curiosity. Their bond, formed under the ancient rites of the Zeri, was beginning to weave its influence into their lives, promising not just challenges, but the potential for profound understanding and unity. The following morning brought a new perspective for Niara and Jason as they met under the soft glow of the rising twin suns. The Citadel was waking, its inhabitants moving about their daily tasks, oblivious to the profound connection forged in the night between the human and the Zeri. "Good morning," Jason greeted Niara as they approached each other in the central courtyard, a public space filled with the soft sounds of flowing water and the gentle rustling of leaves. The overnight discussions had evidently eased some of the tension between them, allowing a more relaxed interaction. "Good morning," Niara replied, a slight smile on her lips. Did you manage to find some sleep after all? A bit, Jason admitted, though it's strange to wake up feeling like you've shared your dreams with someone else. Niara nodded empathetically. It is strange, and likely something we'll need to get used to. Today, I thought we could visit the archives. There might be more information there that could help us understand our bond better. As they walked towards the ancient library of the Citadel, a repository of knowledge containing scrolls and data crystals, centuries old, their conversation drifted towards the theoretical aspects of their bond. I read about emotional and cognitive resonance last night, Jason said, referencing the digital scrolls he had accessed from his room. It seems our ancestors believed that such bonds could enhance not only personal understanding, but also societal harmony. That's the ideal, Niara responded. In practice, it requires a lot of adjustment and mutual respect. Bonds like ours can lead to great achievements or significant conflicts. Upon reaching the archives, they were greeted by the keeper, an elderly Zeri with deep-set eyes and a gentle demeanor. "Ah, the newly bonded," he remarked, his voice a soft echo in the vast chamber. "What wisdom do you seek today?" Niara explained their situation, and the keeper nodded knowingly, guiding them through rows of ancient texts until they reached a section dedicated to the lore of bonds. He pulled out several scrolls and a couple of data crystals, placing them on a reading table. "Here you will find the tales of bonds from the ages, both the triumphs and the trials," the keeper explained. "Learn well, for each bond is a path to both enlightenment and peril." Jason and Niara spent hours poring over the documents, discovering stories of bonded pairs who had changed the course of their societies, and others who had succumbed to the weight of their connection. Each story added a layer of understanding and caution to their own situation. As they read, they occasionally shared looks of astonishment or concern, their bond silently deepening with the shared knowledge of their potential path. "It seems the key is balance," Jason noted, reflecting on a tale of a pair whose bond had grown too intense, leading to a tragic end. "Yes, balance and boundaries," Niara agreed. "We need to be mindful of how much we lean on this connection. It's a powerful tool, but it can also be a formidable weapon." By the time the twin suns were setting, casting long shadows through the high windows of the archive, Niara and Jason had gathered a small trove of useful insights. They thanked the keeper, who offered them a parting piece of advice. "Remember, the bond is only as strong or as weak as the hearts that hold it." As they left the archives, the weight of the keeper's words lingered between them. They knew that navigating their bond would require more than understanding ancient texts. It would require understanding each other, forging a path not just with knowledge, but with empathy and respect. The day had brought them closer, not just in terms of their mystical connection, but in their mutual commitment to managing it wisely. As they walked back through the courtyard, the evening light casting golden hues over the scene, there was a sense of quiet understanding between them, a recognition that their journey together was just beginning. The next few days were a blend of routine and revelation for Niara and Jason as they navigated the complexities of their bond within the daily rhythms of the Citadel. They spent their mornings engaged in their respective duties, Niara attending to her responsibilities among the Zeri Council, and Jason communicating with his Earth Command, explaining and documenting his unprecedented situation. Despite the distances involved, their bond seemed to effortlessly bridge the gaps, allowing them to share brief flashes of emotion or snippets of thought throughout the day. These moments, initially jarring, gradually became a comforting undercurrent to their separate lives, a silent dialogue that kept them connected amidst their busy schedules. One afternoon, as the Citadel's twin suns began their descent, casting a warm amber light over the stone and glass structures, Niara and Jason met in the garden where they had first discussed setting boundaries. The garden had become a sanctuary for them, a neutral space where the beauty of alien flora provided a backdrop for difficult conversations and quiet reflections. "I've been thinking about what the keeper said," Niara began, her voice thoughtful as she traced her finger along the edge of a luminescent leaf, about the bond being as strong or as weak as the hearts that hold it. It made me realize that this connection between us, it's not just about managing an ancient force, it's about managing ourselves, our own strengths and vulnerabilities. Jason nodded, his expression contemplative. I've felt that too, he admitted. There's this constant awareness of another person's emotional state, which forces me to confront my own feelings more directly. It's like being held accountable, not just by you, but by the bond itself. They walked slowly through the garden paths, their steps synchronized, a physical manifestation of their growing attunement. Do you think it's changed you? Jason asked after a pause, glancing at Niara. In some ways, yes, she replied, her eyes meeting his. I find myself considering your reactions, your feelings almost as much as my own. It's expanding my perspective, pushing me to be more empathetic, not just towards you, but in my dealings with others as well. And for me, it's about patience, Jason said, chuckling softly. I've had to learn to pause, to feel through the bond before reacting. It's not something I was particularly good at back on Earth. As they reached a bench overlooking a softly bubbling fountain, they sat down, the sound of the water mingling with the rustling of the leaves above. The garden was quiet, with most of the Citadel's inhabitants engaged in their evening tasks. Have you thought about what will happen when we need to make decisions that might affect the bond? Jason asked, turning towards Niara. Decisions that might pull us in different directions. Niara considered his question seriously. I have, she said after a moment, and I believe that as long as we maintain open communication and mutual respect, we can navigate those challenges. The bond doesn't have to be a shackle. It can be a bridge, helping us to understand and support each other's choices. Jason nodded, satisfied with her response. A bridge, he repeated softly, liking the metaphor. A connection that not only binds but also supports and enriches. The suns set completely, leaving the garden illuminated by the soft glow of bioluminescent plants and the twin moons overhead. In the quiet of the evening, with the gentle sounds of the citadel around them, Niara and Jason sat together, each contemplating the unique path they were on. The bond, with all its complexities, was evolving into something neither had expected, a source of strength, a means of deeper understanding, and a foundation for a partnership that transcended worlds. As they rose to leave the garden, the bond pulsed softly between them, a quiet affirmation of their shared journey, reminding them that while the path ahead might be uncharted, they would not be walking it alone. Over the following weeks, Niara and Jason found themselves increasingly attuned to the subtleties of their bond, each adjustment bringing a deeper level of understanding and respect for one another. The challenges they faced, from navigating political tensions within the Citadel to addressing the logistical issues presented by Jason's unique position between his Earth Command and the Zeri, were met with a unified front. Their bond, once a source of uncertainty, had become their greatest asset. One crisp morning, as the first light of the twin suns pierced the cool dawn air, Niara and Jason stood together on a high balcony overlooking the Citadel. The city was awakening below them, its inhabitants starting another day, unaware of the quiet conversations that had shaped the night. Today's council meeting will be challenging, Niara confessed, her eyes scanning the horizon. There are factions within the council who are wary of our bond and what it might mean for Zeri autonomy. Jason nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. And they'll be looking at me, trying to figure out if I'm a threat or an ally. Niara turned to face him, her expression serious yet calm. But we know the truth of what this bond has brought us. It's not just a connection between two individuals, it's a potential bridge between our worlds. Today, we need to help them see that. As they prepared to address the council, their morning was spent in strategic discussion, planning their words carefully. They reviewed historical precedents, scientific data on interspecies alliances, and philosophical arguments about the benefits of such bonds, armed with knowledge and united by their shared vision. When the time came to walk into the council chamber, Niara and Jason did so side by side, their steps firm and their resolve clear. The chamber was a grand room, circular and lined with towering pillars, filled with the representatives of Zeri society, all waiting to hear what the bonded pair had to say. Niara spoke first, her voice strong and clear. "Esteemed council, we stand before you not just as representatives of two species, but as living proof of the possibilities that our bond can bring. This connection has opened pathways of understanding and cooperation that were previously unimaginable." Jason followed, his tone equally firm but infused with his characteristic earnestness. "From an Earth perspective, this bond is unprecedented, but the potential it holds for peace, for truly understanding another culture from the inside out, is worth considering. It's a gateway to a kind of diplomacy that goes beyond treaties and negotiations." Their words resonated in the chamber, sparking whispers and nods among some, though skepticism remained evident in the eyes of others. The debate that followed was intense, with questions about security, autonomy, and the implications of such a bond for the broader Zeri and Earth relations. Niara and Jason answered each query with patience and insight, their responses not just informed by their own experiences, but also by the emotional and cognitive exchange facilitated by their bond. They felt each other's support, a silent undercurrent that kept them grounded and focused. As the meeting drew to a close, the council was visibly divided, but the opposition had softened, the edges of their arguments blunted by the evident sincerity and the tangible benefits Niara and Jason presented. The decision was made to observe the effects of the bond further, with more open discussions planned for the future. Walking back from the council chamber, Niara and Jason felt a mixture of relief and accomplishment. "No matter how they decide eventually, today we've started a conversation," Niara said, her voice tinged with fatigue but also pride. Jason agreed, his hand briefly touching hers in a gesture of solidarity. "And whatever comes, we face it together," he added, the bond pulsing warmly between them, a reminder of the strength they drew from their unity. Their walk back to the garden was quiet, reflective, and beneath the early evening stars, they felt not just the weight of their responsibilities, but also the profound depth of their connection, a bond that had grown from uncertainty to a profound emblem of unity and hope. In the months that followed, the bond between Niara and Jason became a subject of fascination and a symbol of potential unity between their species. Their days were filled with collaborative projects, diplomatic meetings, and shared efforts to build bridges between Earth and the Zeri. As their understanding of each other deepened, so too did the trust and respect between their respective worlds. One evening, as the twin suns set, casting a golden glow over the citadel, Niara and Jason found themselves once again in the serene garden where many of their most candid conversations had taken place. The garden was in full bloom, with vibrant flowers and shimmering leaves reflecting the peaceful coexistence they had fought so hard to cultivate. "Look at how much has changed since we first walked here," Niara remarked, her gaze sweeping over the garden that had witnessed the evolution of their bond. Jason nodded, his eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "I remember how daunting it all seemed. Now it feels like this garden, a place of growth, resilience, and beauty." They sat on their favorite bench, the air around them filled with the gentle sounds of the evening. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we hadn't been bonded?" Jason asked, turning to Niara with a curious expression. Niara considered his question, her hand reaching out to touch the petals of a nearby flower. "I do, sometimes, but then I realize that this bond, with all its challenges and surprises, has brought us, and our worlds, closer than we ever could have imagined on our own. It's taught me so much," Jason added, "about the power of understanding, about the strength that comes from truly seeing and being seen. I wouldn't change it." As they talked, The first stars began to appear in the sky, joining the twin moons in a dance of light and shadows. The bond between them pulsed softly, a rhythmic beat that had become as natural as their own heartbeats. "We've started something new, Niara, something important," Jason said, his voice filled with a quiet conviction. "This bond isn't just about us anymore. It's a bridge between two worlds, a promise of a more understanding, cooperative future." Niara smiled, her eyes meeting his. "And together, we'll keep building on that promise, making sure it's strong enough to last." They sat there in comfortable silence, watching as the night deepened and the garden lights flickered on, casting soft glows on the paths before them. Their journey had begun with uncertainty and fear, but it had blossomed into a profound connection that transcended their differences, a testament to the transformative power of trust and shared goals. The garden, once a symbol of their initial apprehensions, had become a place of celebration, of the growth and beauty that can flourish from the most unexpected beginnings. And as they sat hand in hand, the bond between them was no longer a forge of destiny, but a chosen commitment to mutual understanding and respect, a legacy of peace they would nurture for the rest of their lives. In the quiet of the garden, under the watchful gaze of the moons and stars, Niara and Jason's story closed on a note of hopeful continuation, their bond, a beacon for both their peoples and a symbol of the new horizons they would explore together.